Hey everyone, it's Dr. RAMANI. So let's take on the perennial, constant question of, do narcissistic people change? Let's take that on. It is the biggest debate in the narcissism world. It is probably what survivors grapple with most. The question of, can they change? Listen, my read on the clinical evidence is no, not really. And some of this comes down to finer points, such as for those people who do say narcissistic people can change with therapy, is how long any kind of change would last, the kind of changes we see, the meaningfulness of the change. But when you take a big view at change, the probability is no, not significantly. I was speaking with someone yesterday, and he and I talked about it. And he said that he had talked to several people who believe the answer to the question, can a narcissistic person change, is yes. And he had talked to lots of shrinks and researchers and the like. I knew the work he was talking about, and I knew why they were saying this. But I told him, I said, still, even on the basis of that evidence, was not convinced at either a population level or at a meaningful level we have come anywhere near any kind of so-called accessible treatment that would change a narcissist. Listen, folks, personality change is no joke. And again, the evidence for sustained personality change in anybody, me, you, narcissist, anyone, it's pretty flimsy. Short of a head injury, stroke, or trauma, I ain't seeing much evidence that our personality changes. I have worked with lots of clients in my practice and talked with even more through groups I've done and research I've conducted. And if there's one verdict here, it's that personalities really don't change. And when they do, it isn't the treatment that is causing the shift, nor is it the desire to change. Something happens to us, like I said, getting hit on the head. So for a very narcissistic person to change, it would require their personality to change. And we kind of know that there's really no good therapies for that. It would also require motivation to change, meaning that the person thinks that they should change. And since we know that narcissism is associated with poor self-reflective capacity, that's probably not going to happen either. I know that even beyond the whole issue of trauma bonding, that many people out there in narcissistic relationships pray every day that the narcissistic person could change, would change. It would allow families to function again, life to be less stressful, relationships to sustain, jobs to be more satisfying. If the yelling could stop, if there was less entitlement, less selfishness, less invalidation, it would be better. And so any shred of hope that change is possible is often grasped onto by many folks in narcissistic relationships and keeps folks on that hope roller coaster that we all know so well. But let's just say, as this guy was saying about these psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors who believe that meaningful change can happen, let's just take that and say, yeah, maybe a little change can happen. Over the years, I have worked with enough narcissistic clients to know that shifts can happen. For example, I've had narcissistic clients who actually learned to stop throwing entitled tantrums about their no-show fee when they didn't bother coming to therapy. I have had narcissistic clients who would learn to say thank you and not just expect things to happen the way they wanted. I have had narcissistic clients who said that they wanted to work on the fact that they're aware that they yell at their partners because they know that it's hurting the partner's feelings. So they wanted to stop yelling at their partners. I guess we could call that change. The one person who wanted to stop yelling didn't stop yelling, by the way. But the core of their personalities remained. They were still very, very sensitive to criticism, very reactive, very manipulative, entitled, rageful. They made a few behavioral shifts. They had some insights. I was happy for them. From my chair as a therapist, that was real change. And it wasn't easy. But here's the deal. It didn't help their relationships one tiny bit. All these folks who were learning a few more thank yous, who are learning to manage their tantrums better, who are not spitting out their adult pacifiers and feeling bad after they raged at someone and made them cry. They had already devastated the people they were with. After you have been betrayed, doubted, devalued, minimized, humiliated, shamed, lied to, gaslighted, and discarded dozens and dozens of times, the kind of change that someone would need to make to foster reparations, to move forward, I haven't seen it. Listen, life is not a feel-good Oscar-nominated movie. It's not how people work. Maybe when we talk and focus and make it about the narcissistic people changing, we're missing the point. Maybe the point really is not about whether or not they change, but whether a narcissistic person can change enough to make a relationship with a person they have already hurt many times actually work. Maybe the question is not, can a narcissist change? But rather, can a narcissistic relationship change? Narcissistic folks want a lot of credit when they get it right one time, almost like a little kid who just learned to tie their shoes or ride a bike. Like, look, Mom, I got it right? And the narcissist is like, look, I got it right. Empathy, right? I didn't even get mad, right? So now, once again, you have to provide narcissistic supply. The new narcissistic supply for someone who is telling you that they are changing. Now what you have to do is say, yeah, you're doing great empathy, love it. Thanks for not yelling at me. Can a relationship change? You drop it in the comments. Can a relationship change after years of betrayal, lying, insults, manipulation, gaslighting, and hurt? Is it realistic to expect the other person, the person who's hurt, to embrace the narcissistic person's change and say, okay, I can have faith in this, and look how much they're trying? No, we can't expect that. And since in the vast majority of cases, the narcissistic person has already future faked multiple times in this relationship, saying things like, I'm going to change this time will be different. I personally think it's actually horrifying to even begin to ask the other person in the relationship to believe them this time. The folks in the narcissist can change camp often do not account for the experience of the survivors in these relationships. They do not account or care or they're not interested in how much hurt the other person in a narcissistic relationship has endured, and to recognize that at some point, the narcissistic person is nothing more than a hurtful stimulus that the other person in the relationship is almost psychologically wincing, eternally walking on eggshells. Listen, on a good day, when a narcissistic person is well supplied and things are going their way, they may show a little change. And we know that when narcissistic folks are well supplied and feel safe, their behavior might even be okay, might even be a little bit nice. That isn't change. That's the luck of a good day. That's always happened in this relationship. The test of any relationship is how the parties behave on a bad day, on a stressed day. And when they mess up, how quickly they're able to take responsibility and make amends. So maybe we change up the language. Sure, listen, the world's a big place. And there are some really motivated narcissistic folks out there with some access to some really good therapy, and maybe hit some kind of rock bottom and put their heads down and do the work and create a life without that much stress so they don't blow. But this comes after years of wreaking havoc on spouses, partners, family members, and children. Once again, the narcissistic folks get to run the show. We are supposed to applaud them when they make these little micro changes and embrace it as though nothing happened. You don't get to bring up the stuff from the past, is what they'll tell you, but they'll do it all the time. And again, on the stress days, and those stress days will come, It will likely go back to how it always was, except this time the narcissistic people may say, oh, come on, I've been great for the last however many days. You can't hold this against me. But this may be a litany of heartbreaking insults or lies or manipulations. Yes, you can hold that against them. Yes, you can lose trust in them for that. In these relationships, because it's so chronic, something happened, something big. If this was a parent, what happened was your development and sense of self were harmed. In a relationship, it may be years of your life. If it's a workplace or a boss, it's years of your career, years you can't get back. Maybe, sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, a narcissistic person does change a little. Maybe the consequences, there's just too much heat. But I can promise you this. Even if they change a little, the relationship won't. There's a point at which the fault lines are too deep. And to expect survivors of narcissistic relationships to just snap to because the narcissistic person made a little change seems pretty inequitable. For some of you, you may not be wanting much. Turning the volume down on the rage, stop cheating, communicating more clearly, and you may get it. And you may recognize, meh, the relationship didn't really change. But with those things managed, fewer tantrums, that kind of thing, it feels bearable. It may very well be that after a narcissistic person really blows up a relationship, that there is no act two. Maybe that narcissistic person may take their newly formed persona out into the world and interact with people they haven't yet hurt. Maybe they'll try anew. They don't have that track record with them. Will that work? Only you know. But even if they change a little, the general landscape of the relationship probably won't. Old habits and old personality patterns die hard. So when we focus too much on the narcissistic person changing, what we lose in that translation is, will the relationship change? Probably not. But also, can those changes actually be the glue, the bondo as it was, that would fill those cracks? It's kind of not how broken hearts and the cracks and the fractures that happen from being repeatedly hurt actually work. Thanks again.